When I think about the brand Zelos, the first thing that comes to my mind is divers. Divers, sports style watches, pilots, really tool specific style of watches. And the designs and the colours, they're out there for sure. And this one here is no exception. Now it's not a diver or a pilot's watch, it's a dress watch. And it's got a Swiss manual wind movement in it. The watch is called the Nova 2, obviously following from their first iteration of this watch, the original Nova. And I want to share my thoughts on this watch, on how it's behaved on the wrist throughout the week. Because for someone who's not into dress watches, I've enjoyed it, but I've also got a couple of question marks. So without further ado, let's check this thing out. Now when it comes to dress watches, the category is quite vast. Usually it's a time-only minimal design, but that doesn't stop manufacturers from designing a dial that steals the show. And that's exactly what I've got here in my hands. This watch for me, it's like an accessory or a piece of cosmetic jewelry on your wrist that also doubles as a watch, a time-telling device. Now it's well made and it's been extremely comfortable on the wrist all week, but I also have found several things which I want to touch on that could offer room for improvement. Now you saw the pop-up, Zelos has sponsored this video, so I will of course leave a link in the description section if you want to check out this or any of their watches. Feel free to do so. And diving straight into the specs of this watch, I measure a case diameter of 37 and a case height of 8.8. That lug to lug is 43.9mm and a lug width of 20. Now that crown is a 5.4mm signed crown. The watch offers 50 meters of water resistance, and the total weight on the supplied Halloween leather strap I measure exactly 60 grams. Now, as you can see from the overhead, it's got excellent wearability on the wrist. It's very comfortable, especially with that strap. It's been soft from the get-go, so I've had no break-in period. And the height of the watch and its overall proportions are very good. Now, the detail in that mosaic dial is something else. It really plays with the light well. There's a lot of colour coming off that, from purples to pearl, blues, blacks, you name it. It's in there, and it's been a real showstopper on this watch. If you notice the case of the watch, it's fully polished. It's got a very interesting step down cut on those lugs. It makes for a good visual detail and adds to the slenderness of the watch. And speaking of slenderness, the website does state that it's 7mm in height. However, I measured 8.8. So without the sapphire crystal, the case itself is 7mm. But as an entirety, as a watch, to the top of that sapphire crystal, it's exactly 8.8. So keep that in mind. Now turning this watch over, you can see there's an exhibition case back. It's got a sapphire crystal, and hiding behind that sapphire is an ETA 7001. A very reliable workhorse. The movement does not offer hacking, and this one's been running at about -5 seconds per day. And speaking of that sapphire, it's a boxed sapphire crystal. As you can see, it's doing a beautiful job. I think it's really nicely suited to this piece because it offers a very vintage feel and some real charm, which I think elevates the overall watch's look. But it's all about that dial, guys. That dial is absolutely superb. It's the first time I've ever handled one of these mosaic dials from Zelos. You can see there's a subdial of the 6, and below that subdial is their logo. So they've omitted the 6 o'clock Arabic and added their logo instead. It's basically cleaned up the entire dial. So for a dress watch, I think it's done really nicely. Now looking closely at that strap, it's a Halloween leather. It's been soft and malleable from the get-go, as I mentioned. I've not had to actually wear this in. There's a slight taper from 20 to 18mm at the clasp, and that clasp, as you can see, is fully brushed with their logo and a couple of high polished bevels on the side. Now being a dress watch, they've opted for no lume, and for me that's not an issue, because it is more of a dressy style watch. Some manufacturers might put a bit of lume on that handset, others opt not to. Whatever the case, they've kept it minimal, it does work, so I've had no gripes in that department. And before I get onto the gripe section, what is the price? Well, the watch comes in at $799 US. That's the launch price. That might sound a little bit expensive to some, but I've got to tell you, the fact that it's got a Swiss Etter movement, the watch is extremely thin, and even with that crystal at 8.8mm, you can see that the case back is almost completely missing. It's flat as a pancake. So wearability wise, this watch will wear under any cuff or shirt sleeve. And on that note, what are my gripes or room for improvement on this watch? Well, I did mention there is no hacking. So when you pull the crown out, you notice that the seconds hand keeps sweeping. So when I adjust the time, whether I go backwards or forwards, it still keeps going. Now that's not a deal breaker because it is a dress watch, and ideally we don't buy a dress style watch for supreme accuracy. So for potential people buying these watches, bear that in mind, there is no hacking. Secondly, the price is a little bit on the higher side, $7.99. I know a lot of you guys might be complaining at that, but there is a lot of watch. It's a petite watch, it's a thin watch, it's a decent movement as I mentioned, but that dial for me is the hero. Another gripe that I found on this watch is that crown, because when you wind the movement, the crown actually springs back. Now, I won't say a gripe, it's actually an observation. Now, normally you get a little bit of spring back, but this one has quite a bit, so just mentioning that for you guys, the crown spins back quite a bit more than normal. Next for me, that clasp, that tank buckle, it really doesn't suit the style of this watch. You've got a fully polished case, you've got a highly brushed tank buckle, and it's big. So yeah, I don't think they've thought that through. I mean, it's not a real deal breaker. Ideally, I'd probably be just changing the strap out, but it would have been nice to have a smaller, more petite buckle so that it falls in line with the styling, or should I say the classic styling of a dress watch. Now, in saying that, does the clasp work well? Well, it works perfectly. It's extremely well balanced under the wrist, it's stable, the strap is stable, so I've not had issues with it. I'm just mentioning it on a classic visual perspective. And lastly, I did mention that the watch is like an accessory or a piece of cosmetic jewelry on your wrist that doubles as a watch. And for me, at the end of the day, that Mosaic dial really plays with the light beautifully. It pops, there's colours, purples, blues, pearl. It's impressive to look at, I must say. So legibility here, I think it's been placed on second tier because the visual dynamic and optical stimulation here is number one. It's a bit of a statement piece. It's a good looking watch. It is also a fingerprint magnet being fully polished. You might find yourself continually cleaning this watch. I think as an overall finished product they've done well. I would have preferred a slightly bigger taper on that strap and a smaller clasp. That's me. More classically minded, but again, it works well, it's stable. Functionality wise, I've had no issues. So hit me up in the comments, guys. Let me know what you think of this watch. It's the Nova 2. It's a dress style watch coming out of Zelos, and I know they're funky with their colors and their styling and the designs. This one here is a cross between a tamed case design, classic crystal, but a beautiful dial that absolutely pops and plays with the light, and it's exactly what I think a dress style watch is calling for. So thanks again for watching. Be well, be safe, enjoy the watch that's on your wrist, enjoy the hobby, continue to enjoy one another, and we'll see you in the next one.